Welcome back. All right, so it's been a while since I did a 32 team video, and again, the reverse retros mean I now have hats to match some of the old jerseys I have, so that's fun. But anyways, I want to do a 32 team video today talking about 32 players having fantastic seasons and just get into it. So we're going to go from Winnipeg through Anaheim. Shouldn't take that long. I'm looking down because there's a rabbit at my feet, so I got to make sure I'm not going to step on the rabbits. Bad luck right there. So we'll start with Winnipeg, and I'm not putting up totals. You guys can look up totals if you'd like, obviously. It's a free internet and all that. Adam Lowry. For Winnipeg, I was going to put Josh Morrissey, but Morrissey's in the 10 game point streak, and that's kind of a well-known thing. Lowry has had an amazing start to the season, by which I mean the first third of the season he's been very, very good. And so nice to see him getting the goals, the assists, the points that reflect his work ethic. So Lowry ends up there. For Washington, since returning from injury, I need to make sure it's Y or an I at the end of this. Dmitry Orlov. Orlov has been excellent for the Caps since coming back. The Caps, obviously, recently playing much better, and the return of Orlov has not hurt them in the slightest. He is a very important top four defenseman to the Washington Capitals. So, yeah, there you go. For Vegas, Riley Smith. So see, you guys can start to see here, I'm looking at players that aren't in the spotlight, aren't necessarily the main event when you're buying a ticket. Riley Smith, coming off of what was honestly a down year. I was kind of surprised Vegas brought him back. I thought, well, he's probably run his course as a Vegas Golden Knight. He'll move on to somewhere else. But unlike Boston, Dallas, and Florida before them, they said, no, we don't care about the down season, and they kept him around. And it's really done quite well. His goal scoring's been fantastic this year, whether it keeps up or not. The fact is he's on pace for at least 30 goals, you got to think. And, absolutely remarkable comeback by Riley Smith. For Vancouver, so at the time that Ilya Mikheyev signs his contract, there was a lot of, well, he's not worth it, and what are the Canucks thinking? Now, I'm not going to say Canucks management has made all kinds of great moves, but Mikheyev's been fantastic. He's been really, really good for Vancouver. He's been worth the money. His contract is not one of the problematic contracts on Vancouver. Is it odd that they signed him when there was other work to be done on the blue line? You could make that argument, sure. But I would say that Mikheyev's been an excellent investment and has given them the ability to move a top six forward, to move a winger, and maybe improve their blue line. And hopefully that happens sooner rather than later. But Mikheyev's been excellent. For Toronto, Rasmus Sandin. So as Toronto's blue line issues with injury after injury after injury just continued and continued, Rasmus Sandin has emerged as a really pretty good defenseman. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing articles about how, Sandin, he's pretty good. Yeah, when you gave the guy the chance, he actually came through. And that's my argument that I've had with Sandin for the last couple of years, that I wanted the Leafs to really give him a chance. Now he's getting that, and I think he's forced himself onto the roster permanently. And hopefully as a top four defenseman as well. Sandin, very good young defenseman for a team that could use that. For Tampa Bay, now on recap videos, I talk a lot about Brandon Hagel. I've talked a lot about Hagel back to when he was in Chicago last year. He had an amazing run going with Chicago, and then they traded him. Understandable, Chicago trades him, right? They're going through the rebuild and all. But Hagel's been absolutely awesome for Tampa Bay. Both teams based out of Florida seem to do a pretty good job of the scouting of pros and figuring out which pro players would fit in really well on their roster, not just for that season, but following seasons. And I think that's the case with Hagel. They bring him in last year, more of a support role than what it is now, and he's really shown that with some of the exits Tampa Bay's had, he can step into a more prominent role. Same with Nick Paul. Really, it was a coin flip for me as to whether I was going to talk about Hagel or Paul, and there's Hagel on the board. For San Jose, Nico Sturm is not a superstar player, but he has 9 goals, and he's played well for San Jose. And it's funny because I remember very early in the season, he missed an open net, and I had that right in the review, and I'm like, yeah, no, he's snake bit. It's not happening this year, and now 9 goals. So there you go. It's been nice to see the turnaround for Sturm, who's kind of bounced around the league. Since San Jose's in a rebuild of their own, although it's not officially a rebuild, he may very well end up getting moved at the deadline. But with the numbers he's putting up, it would improve the return they'd get for Sturm. For Seattle, the funny thing is I've been sitting on this list for 5 days. 5 days since I made up this list. I'm like, today I have to do this. Daniel Sprong has been excellent for Seattle. I don't understand. So Sprong played well for Seattle last year, and then it took a while before they decided to bring him back, and that was on a tryout. So I'm not sure what parts of Sprong's defensive game are so bad that a GM would have pause about bringing him back. So I'm not going to say that Sprong is going to stay in Seattle this year and then maybe beyond, because it's possible they look for a replacement. It's possible he gets moved. But he's been very good. He's a good goal scorer. He's got a good nose for the net. I would probably make a terrible GM. I would probably pick up guys who get really good numbers, but either people would perceive them to be slow skaters, or the advanced stats crowd would be like, I don't know what he's thinking there. So anytime people are like, oh, he should be a GM, my answer to that is no, I shouldn't. Absolutely no. St. Louis, for St. Louis, and again, looking at players that aren't getting talked about a lot, what a guy that's above a point per game that isn't getting talked about a lot, and that's Pavel Buchnevich. Now, one of the reasons Buchnevich isn't going to get talked about so much with his above a point per game status is because there are a lot of players right now that are above a point per game. And I think that makes things a little bit easier to miss when it comes to guys who are off to really good runs so far, guys who've had a really strong first third of the season. Buchnevich has been that for St. Louis. Really, really solid overall player, really, since they got him from the Rangers. For Pittsburgh, this team here, I went with the 600 game player. I mean, Crosby and Malkin are the guys who really, drive the team. Rust on some level as well, but Rickard Rakell's been excellent. He knows how to get to the net. He knows how to get goals. This is what he's done his whole career. Now, at times, he's been a little more inconsistent with it, but he is a goal scorer. I'm still looking for the rabbit, but he is a goal scorer, and it's been nice to see that goal scoring touch come back again with Pittsburgh this season after some injury riddled seasons, some really tough seasons for him offensively. It's good to see him back at it. For Philadelphia was a bit tough because obviously they've had a rough start this year. Noah Cates. So we're in between the first and second period between Toronto and Philadelphia right now. I didn't see anything in that game to tell me that the player I picked for Philadelphia is necessarily wrong. Noah Cates has been prominent for Philadelphia. The offense will come at some point, I do believe. But again, with Philadelphia, it's tough to pick somebody who's having a really good season that's not in that spotlight. And so, yeah, I'm going to go with Cates. Flyers fans, you can let me know your thoughts. Because again, with the Flyers, it's tough. Some of these teams, it was tough to find a player that I see, flying under the radar, having a really good season. Ottawa. Now, Canuck fans won't be surprised to see Tyler Mott's name up there. Mott's a really hard worker, very good penalty killer, and honestly, he's been driving some of the offense lately too. So it doesn't all reflect in ice time and offensive chances, but honestly, for Mott, it's been a really good run. I really think that the Ottawa Senators got a winner here. I'm not sure why Mott has bounced around the league the way he has. Maybe his asking price was too high for Vancouver to decide to keep him. Maybe it was just time to move on, but at any rate, I'm glad he's doing well in Ottawa, and he seems to be enjoying himself. The New York Rangers, I went with. This won't surprise people who watch my videos regularly either, but he's had a really good run so far this year, and that's Keandre Miller. I do think with Keandre Miller, there may be some more offense there, but I'm always impressed with his defensive play, his composure, and the fact that he really looks like more of a veteran defenseman out there than he is. He has adjusted very easily to the NHL, and as years go by, I'm just more and more impressed with him. So Keandre Miller gets on the board. For the New York Islanders, it's funny. When they re-signed Zach Parise in the offseason, there was a lot of eye rolls and a lot of why being asked. But honestly, Parise's been pretty good. I think he has 11 goals so far for the Islanders. Yeah, he's been good. And while he's not the player that he was, say, a decade ago, who is? And so, yeah, for Parise, I know Crosby, yes, there are others. That's rhetorical. But yes, Zach Parise, very good run for him, and it's been nice to see him playing well for the New York Islanders, a team that may very well make the playoffs again. All right, New Jersey. Oh, why did I have to pick a long name here? Any Devils fan can tell you Jonas Siegenthaler is excellent defensively. And watching the hockey that I do, I will agree, I will concur that Siegenthaler is excellent. New Jersey's blue line in general is just made up of underrated pieces and underrated players. And this is before Nemitz comes in, before Luke Hughes comes in, before they trade for Quinn Hughes. You know, all this fun stuff. So yeah, Siegenthaler has been quite the story so far this year, and he's been great for the Devils. No part of me says, well, maybe it shouldn't be Siegenthaler. It just, when I was putting this together, I thought, no, it has to be Siegenthaler. For Nashville, you know, it's funny, he's been a healthy scratch since then. But I'm going to explain this. So why would it be Mark Jankowski? It's Mark Jankowski because when he's played, he's been pretty good. They waived Ellie Tolvanen and kept Mark Jankowski, which I think is two things. One, it does show that Tolvanen wasn't making that development Nashville had hoped for, and it shows that they believe Jankowski has a spot on their roster. He probably would have cleared waivers. Probably wouldn't have been a problem. But at any rate, he still got a job. And I know he was a healthy scratch yesterday. It made me think, well, maybe I don't want Jankowski on the board. Maybe I want to be somebody else. But I'll go with Jankowski because he's been good when he's been in the lineup. And he is a player that can be an extra forward here and there. But I think he's played well when he's been in the lineup. For Montreal, so we're into the second half of this. Another long name. What am I thinking? Sam Montembeault. Montembeault, coming out of last season, I don't think opinions were that high. I think the opinions have gone up of Montembeault so far this year. He's a good goaltender, and I've said that since he was in Florida. Goaltenders, I feel bad for them because basically if you go out there and you have a bad start, you're probably done. Like if you're the third guy in the organization and you go into the net and you don't play very well, you're probably done. Whereas if you're a forward that comes up from the minors and you have a rough game, you might be done, but you're probably going to get another chance. With goaltenders, they don't always get that other chance. Montembeault has fought through down years and fought through everything, and I think he's been really quite good. Minnesota. So for Minnesota, Sam Steele. Sam Steele is fitting in really well, playing a pretty prominent role right now for Minnesota, and he's been a lot of fun to watch. Honestly, Sam Steele, when they brought him into the league in Anaheim, I was really rooting for him. I still am. It's nice to see that he seems to have found a home in Anaheim, or in Minnesota from Anaheim. And I say that because last year in Anaheim, I thought Milano had found a home, and he hadn't. So, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that Steele's there beyond this year, but at the very least, he's played well, and he's really, at this point, a guy who's helping to drive things for Minnesota in a way that probably wasn't anticipated when they picked him up. For the Kings, so I've mentioned this player before in videos, list videos even. And there are people who ask, why does THG like Mikey Anderson so much? Mikey Anderson's even added a little bit of offense to his game this year. So Anderson's playing quite well. He's very good defensively, and I really enjoy watching him play. Of the players in LA named Anderson, and there were three of them, I never had any doubt that Mikey was the best of them. But then again, it's Anderson Dolan, it's Elias Anderson, that's the other one. So, I mean, it's still praise. It's still praise of Mikey Anderson. And I think that for fans that don't understand where the praise would come from, just look him up, just watch him play. He's a very good player. Really solid defenseman overall, and I think LA has a keeper there. For Florida, another defenseman who I've mentioned before, Gustav Forsling. So you pick up a guy on waivers, you don't expect him to become a top four defenseman, and that's been the story with Gustav Forsling. Very unexpected, and really, honestly, a lot of fun to watch. I have enjoyed watching Forsling become that next level defenseman. And Florida in general, while they've had a rough year, and it didn't get better last night, I don't put that on Forsling or prominent members of that blue line necessarily. I think with Florida, there's other things going on there. There may be another video to be done on Florida, but I won't throw any shade at Forsling. He's been quite good. Edmonton. I went with Zach Hyman. I could have gone with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, but I'm going to go with Hyman. And that's funny too, because last night when Hyman was having trouble with getting goals, eventually, the Oilers got it all figured out. But it's funny because he's around the net so much that even if he's on a short span of a drought, like 2 or 3 games since his last goal, you'll still hear announcers talk about it like, yeah, he's all around the net. He's just snake bit tonight. Because every single game, that's what Hyman does. He goes to the net, drives the play. And I think he is the kind of a player that Toronto wishes they could have held on to. You do have restraints when it comes to the salary cap. I know there are people who don't like Hyman's contract for the length of it, but the way he's playing right now, I don't think the Oilers care. I think the Oilers are quite happy about it. All right, now we're into the final column, and we're up to Detroit. Yep, talked about him before too. That's Filip Hronek, a player who I heard a lot of negativity directed towards in previous seasons. I haven't seen that this year. Hronek has been absolutely phenomenal for the Wings. Now, he has had his issues in previous seasons, and I'm not trying to diminish that. I just think that sometimes with defensemen, the flaws get overblown to a point where people aren't noticing the positives. And with Hronek, I always saw a hardworking player, just no puck luck for him at all. This year, that hasn't been as much of a problem. And so for Hronek, it's really been an interesting season thus far. And yeah, he's been excellent. For Dallas, I'm not going with a forward. Keeping the run of defensemen going with Esa Lindell. Esa Lindell is a solid two-way defenseman. Could there be more offense? Sure, I guess. But the defense is pretty good. And overall, Lindell, an excellent, excellent player for the Dallas Stars. He is underrated on a blue line where you've got Heiskanen, you've got Suter. He covers a lot for some defensive issues that maybe the other guys he's playing with have. He's a good, solid player, and I've been a fan of Lindell's for a long time. Columbus was a tough one because looking for a really good story can be difficult, and especially with injuries being as they are. So when I wrote up this list, it was Vladislav Gavrikov. It is still Vladislav Gavrikov. Really, Vlad, he's been a solid defenseman for them. I've been a fan of his the whole way through. Do I think he's underrated? Yeah, on some level, I do think he's underrated at this point. And so I would say for Gavrikov, he's had a solid season. For Colorado, I went with now. If you're a Colorado fan, Evan Rodriguez not underrated on any level, right? And I know that, and I understand that, and I agree with that. The Colorado fans understand. And for fans who watched him last year in Pittsburgh, you know how good Rodriguez can be. He's streaky. So right now, the difference is this. It doesn't feel like the offensive numbers have to be high for Rodriguez in Colorado. There are enough guys around him that can produce, and he can just play his game. The offense has been good, but it doesn't have to be fantastic, and he's really been a spark plug for them. He has been very much the energy guy for Colorado. The fans love him, and it's been a good story for an Avalanche team that's been besieged by injuries, which also included Rodriguez at one point. For Chicago, I had to change Chicago's. I did. So I'm going with Max Domi. Max Domi's had a remarkable run back to prominence. He's looked good, and that's important, right? If you're a fan of the Hawks, I think Domi's been one of the bright spots. I did initially have Arvid Soderblom. Then he had the game he had the other night. I thought I got to change it to Domi. Although Soderblom, I will give him an honorable mention because I think he's still a good goaltender. But the numbers have definitely dropped off for him. Not necessarily because of him, but at the very least, Max Domi's been a good story for a Chicago team that struggled to have good stories. Carolina, it has to be one player. Now, what's interesting is that Pyotr Kochetkov at this point is a hero to Carolina fans. But I don't know that fans that haven't watched him play yet understand just how well he's playing. It's sort of reminiscent of Shesterkin last season, or when Shesterkin first broke into the league and teams had never seen him before. And so with goaltenders, that's a factor too. But honestly, Kochetkov's been great. I'm starting to see articles now about what happens when Freddie comes back, which is a question I've been asking for weeks. I don't know that Kochetkov, you can sell Canes fans on the idea of sending him to the minors, even if he is waiver exempt, which he is. But still, I don't think you can sell fans on the idea of sending down arguably or even inarguably their best goaltender based on waivers when the goal is to win a Stanley Cup. For Calgary, Adam Ruzicka. I don't know how far Adam Ruzicka goes in the NHL. I don't know how long he's going to be a prominent player for the Flames. But he's been very good and very unexpectedly good as well. So I'm going with Ruzicka. I think that it's been a good story for a Calgary team that has had its bumps along the way too. And so yeah, all the best for Ruzicka, for the Flames, and yeah, thumbs up to the Flames on the way they're deploying Ruzicka at this stage. I know that his points per 60 minutes is really high, which means they're deploying him well. Buffalo. There are still people who try to dunk on the Jeff Skinner contract. It's foolish to do so for a player who's above a point per game, who had a very good year last year too. So that's 2 straight seasons for Skinner where he's looked like he's worth the money, which is a first since he signed that contract. I think it helps that the team around him is better too. I think that definitely has pushed up his numbers, which is something that people who've supported Skinner all along have always said. Give him better line mates, give him a better team, you'll see his numbers go up. And this year that appears to be true. For Boston, Boston gets a lot of attention. I'm going with Taylor Hall. Taylor Hall has been nothing short of a revelation for Boston this year. He's playing the best hockey he has since his Hart Trophy season in New Jersey. Just absolutely remarkable. I don't know how many points he ends up with. I don't know that necessarily matters. What matters is he's playing some of his best hockey, and he's just looked great out there. So I'm going with Taylor Hall. For Arizona, and there's a reason to have this guy on the board. So yesterday I did the video where I talked about the Oilers in part in response to the Mark Spector article. But Jacob Chychrun in that article, he talked about how Chychrun was bad defensively is what he threw out there. And he's like, that's the last thing the Oilers need. Chychrun is not bad defensively. I don't know where that narrative would come from other than people assuming, looking at his offensive numbers, well, he must not be very good defensively. He's an offensive defenseman. Chychrun is a 200-foot defenseman. And not 200 feet tall. That's Chara. And whatever Soderblom is going to come out of the woods next. There are a bunch of ents. They're going to take over the league. But for Chychrun, he is just such a solid player at both ends of the ice. I think that he's, if anything, right now underrated by some. And I think that whatever team gets him is going to love having him in the lineup. I think Chychrun's immediately going to make any blue line he goes to better. I would welcome him onto any team I cheer for. Anaheim, so to round this out, good, dependable veteran player who is doing very solid work for the Anaheim Ducks this year, Cam Fowler. Everybody else is left. It feels like everybody else has left the Ducks. It's just Fowler now and a bunch of kids. And he's playing well. I think Fowler's played quite well for the Ducks. I think he stepped into a leadership role with them quite well too. And his numbers aren't bad. His numbers are good. So this is just sort of a 32 players that are having excellent seasons that, I don't know, I thought I'd have a little chat about. You guys can let me know your picks in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.